All right, ready?
Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to The Inner Voice with Dr. Foojan Zeine, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Inner Voice Show. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and this show is about what matters most to you in your life, the way we think, we feel, we enjoy this beautiful concept of life. So together today, we're going to listen to and talk to and learn from Julie Simmons and with her latest book, When Food is Comfort. But before that, I want to bring you the latest psychological report that has been out in August 15, 2018. And would love to be able to share this, which is about social class and communication situations. And let me tell you what has happened in the latest research in Goethe University in Frankfurt. So, the latest research says whether individuals grow up in a working class environment or in an academic household, they take on behaviors that are typical for their class. So goes the hypothesis. A social psychologist has now found new evidence to support this hypothesis. Her study also shows, however, that people don't just rigidly exhibit class-specific behavior, but respond flexibly to counterparts from other social classes. So, are people with more money and education dominating and less warm? A social psychological study at Goethe University scrutinizes these type of stereotypes. So how is our behavior influenced by our social class? Sociology has long concerned itself with this question, whether individuals grow up in a working class environment or in an academic household, they take on behaviors that are typically for their class. That's the hypothesis that this study is taking on. The Frankfurt social psychologist, Dr. Anne-Lisa Eiden, has found new evidence to actually support this hypothesis. And her study, which she carried out jointly with researchers from Zurich, Hagen, Idaho, and Tel Aviv universities, and which has been published in the Scientific Journal of Social Psychological and Personality Science, also shows, however, that people don't just rigidly exhibit class-specific behavior, but also respond flexibly to counterparts from other social classes. So a large portion of the research on the influence of social class stems from the ideas of the sociologist Pierre Bourdieu. He describes how the environment in which we grow up inscribes itself deeply into our identity. Now, social psychological authors argue that people from lower social classes have access to fewer resources and can only influence their environment to a limited degree. They therefore rely more on mutual assistance, making solidarity an important value. Now, people identify with this value and behave cooperatively as a result. People from upper social classes, on the other hand, have access to more resources, can choose from among several alternatives, and are less dependent on mutual assistance. Now, these result in individualistic conception of the self, where shaping the environment according to one's own preferences is paramount. These different modes of behavior, therefore, constitute adaptation to corresponding social environments. Now, this theory was supported in part by the current study. Overall, more than 2,000 people in Germany were surveyed for respondents who considered themselves to be members of a lower class. Warm and cooperative interaction with other people in their social class was more important than for those who considered themselves members of the higher social class. In addition, those who earned more and were better educated set more value on demonstrating competence and being assertive in their interactions with others than those in the groups with lower earnings and less education. The authors feared that these differences in behavior could lead to a further increase in social inequality in Germany. which is also happening in the rest of the world. Individuals who exhibit assertiveness have better chances for social advancement. However, they observed differences in behavior were relatively small. That's interesting. The influence of the social class of the individual's counterpart had a significantly greater impact. How do people behave when interacting with someone from a lower or higher social group? The majority of those surveyed describe social differences in Germany as unjustified or not very justified. As a result of that, they found it important to behave warmly and cooperatively toward people with less money and education. Conversely, they set value on appearing competent and assertive toward people with more money and education. That's interesting. So they saw that the values are different. So if the value was actually competence and assertiveness, with those group, they put their value on that and they expressed themselves in that way. And with those people who they thought that being warm and cooperative was more valuable, they brought that part of them outside. That's great. These findings are particularly relevant in view of the fact that social inequality is increasing around the world, although most people perceive this as unjustified, while research based on sociological theories can explain how this inequality can be exacerbated by conditioning within different social classes. The current study offers an optimistic perspective in communication situations between people of different class, where class differences are perceived as illegitimate, solitary, with a poor in assertiveness toward the rich are exhibited. Well, that's the latest research that came from Germany. Now, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Julie Zeine and talking about her latest book, When Food is Comfort and the Emotional Eater's Repair Manual. My God, I need it. And I'm sure a lot of you guys also have some issues with food. And if you don't, you know someone who does. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Dr. Foojan Zeine is a psychotherapist, a marriage and family therapist, and a life coach with more than 27 years of experience. She is the author of the Awareness Integration Model, which has been researched and published in numerous international journals. Dr. Foojan has offices in Beverly Hills, Irvine, and Woodland Hills, California, and also consults online and by telephone. Make an appointment with her today by calling 818-648-2140 or go online to www.foojan.com. That's www.foojan.com. Were you recently injured in a car accident? Then you need the law offices of REF Datacar for your free case evaluation. Don't let the medical bills pile up, and don't let the insurance companies try to settle your claim for a few $100s. Call 714-464-3246. The law offices of REF Datacar serves all of California. If they don't win, you don't pay. So call now, 714-464-3246. This is a paid-for attorney advertisement by the law offices of REF Datacar of Orange, California.
Have you ever wished you could just wake up one day, reach across your nightstand, and hit the life reset button? Let's face it, the struggles and frustrations of everyday life leave millions of women and men around the globe yearning for a new way. And the new way is right here in Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want by Dr. Foojan Zeine. You can get it now at Foojan.com or Amazon.com. Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want. You deserve it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Inner Voice Show. I'm excited to have Julie Zeine, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and is the author.
Hi, Foojan. I don't know if you're speaking to me, but I can't hear you. I can hear the show, but I can't hear you.
At this time, I'm still kind of telling the world about you, the people who are listening. So I'm letting
okay, now I can hear you.
Okay, good. So I'm letting them know that you are the author of When Food is Comfort and the Emotional Eater's Repair Manual, which is your latest book, and that you are in a Los Angeles space and have an online 12-week emotional eating recovery program and offer workshops at venues like Whole Food and UCLA, and they can find you in overeatingrecovery.com. Welcome to my show.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. Sorry for our technical difficulties.
Of course. So, Julie, tell us a little bit about you and your practice and how your practice got into the area of nurturing yourself mindfully and rewiring your brain and ending emotional eating.
Well, I've always been very passionate about mental health, for sure, as a psychobiology major at UCLA, and always interested in weight challenges, body image, and especially since I was in college, very interested in why we gain weight, why we have trouble taking off weight. I wanted to know, was it physiological? Was it psychological? What were the components to this struggle that I was seeing everyone around me have, my family members and the culture at large, and kind of an obsession with being slimmer, and yet we were all struggling with our weight. So I was always very passionate about it, and I always had an intuitive sense that we weren't meant to be overweight or underweight, that we all had kind of a natural weight, and that we weren't meant to count calories or carbohydrates or fat grams or weigh and measure our bodies or our food. Our ancestors didn't do it. The animals out in the wild don't do it. So I was on a quest for many years to figure out all the pieces of the overeating, dieting, and weight gain puzzle. And as I began to put those pieces together in my own life, I really knew that I wanted to help other people. I knew that there were emotional imbalances that led us to turn to food for comfort. There were certainly physiological imbalances, hormonal imbalances, brain chemistry imbalances, food addiction, the kind of chemistry of the food that we have out there today, and spiritual imbalances, not feeling enough passion and purpose and meaning in our lives. So I started my practice specializing in overeating challenges and developed a 12-week emotional eating recovery program about 26 years ago. And I've been specializing in this ever since. And I'm still really passionate. That's why I wrote my first book, The Emotional Eater's Repair Manual. That book is based on the 12-week program because I wanted people outside of Los Angeles to be able to benefit from the work that I was doing. And then I made the 12-week program into a teleseminar coaching format so people could join in from all over the world. And then I wrote the second book, which is a deeper dive into the emotional imbalances that lead us to use food, and also helps the reader understand how our brains get wired. So that's all of it in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Now, from someone who, since I could say the age 12 or 13, have had a lot of issues with...
I'm sorry, I'm struggling to hear you again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, so from someone who has had a struggle of weight gain and loss since I was 12, I could definitely understand the need for all of this, whether it's the emotional or the biochemistry or even the taste, the pleasure aspect of going and hunting after tastes, and all of those impact all of us in some way at some age. It just seems like the ratio of people who have more ups and downs with their weight because of the social, let's say the social concept of it plus the emotional concept of it is much more than people who have actually learned into regulating, their food consumption in a way that is accurate. So it's really, what you're doing is really needed in most everywhere in the world. What I've seen through your book, as I was going through your book, is that you have specific ways and steps to go through. So, for example, in chapter 7 of your book, When Food is Comfort, in page 85, you start working on how the person can name and track emotions and bodily sensations. So first is the awareness of what's going on in our body, and then we'll take it step by step. Can you talk about the step of naming and tracking emotions and body sensations?
Yes, well, that's the first of what I offer in the book, When Food is Comfort, is a 7-skill mindfulness practice that can help you pay attention to your inner world, develop a supportive inner voice, and learn to address emotional eating, and at the same time rewire the brain. So the very first step is called Pop the Hood, because in order for us to address the challenge of overeating, the behavior of overeating, we have to know what's going on inside. So we have to pop the hood, and like a master mechanic, we have to pay attention to our emotions and our bodily sensations. Those two inner world components are going to lead us. They're like precious signals that are there to lead us to our needs. So we begin by learning how to pay attention to them and track them and stay with them, not let them lead us just to our thoughts. Often we get stuck in our thoughts. We move away from our feelings very quickly. So in this step, we really learn to stay present to the emotions. Notice how they present themselves in our bodies as sensations, and just learn how to be with them. And then we move on from there. There are more steps after that.
Yes, and
I can go into them if you want.
Yeah, before that, it just seems like many people confuse their sensations with hunger. What's going on in their body if they're not in tune with the emotional aspect that comes up, and they just want to feed it. And that's part of the, as I'm sensing, your reason of saying, let's be aware of what's going on in our body so we can attend to it in its different way. Like if I'm sad or anxious, it doesn't matter how many donuts I eat. It's not going to take away my sadness. It's just going to fill me up, but it's not going to take care of the issue that it's there. So the awareness of what the feeling and sensation is, it's going to lead me to take care of myself in an appropriate way. And you have beautiful, in your book, you have written bodily sensations, you have written different types of emotions. So for people who are not very savvy or not very aware, they actually get guided into learning about feelings and body sensations so that they can they can actually be aware and look at it.
Right, and even in my first book, when you talk about hunger and fullness, in my first book, we have what's called a body balancing principle, where I teach the reader really to pay attention to hunger and fullness states, to really become aware. So yes, you're right. I mean, those are also bodily sensations, and oftentimes emotional hunger. When we're eating for emotional reasons, emotional hunger can actually feel like physical hunger.
Yes. So
we're going to be kind of ferreting out all of those different kinds of sensations, and I have people that I work with all the time saying to me, I'm getting better at asking myself when I'm turning towards food, am I really having a sensation of physical hunger? No, I'm not. Okay, what am I having? Oh, I think I'm having an emotion. I'm feeling empty, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling lonely, and that's why I'm reaching for food. So that's what we're after. We're really after being able to stop when you want to turn to food, when you're not hungry, or when you want to overeat or binge, or when you want to just make unhealthy comfort food selections too often, is to stop, pop the hood, and find out, what am I feeling? What's really going on inside? Let me get to know myself better. Let me connect to myself in a loving way with curiosity and care.
And Julie, you also in this section talk about how we might be taken hostage or held hostage by unpleasant memories, and that as we get to know ourselves, and it does not mean that we have to go and clear every memory and every trauma before we can take care of ourselves as far as appropriate eating habits, so that we can distinguish between areas of our life that were, taunted and haunted from the past, and be able to work through them in different ways. And yet, by that knowledge, we can awarenessly shift our behaviors in the present moment in not being held hostage or kind of like taken hijacked by those memories.
Right, and what I call that pain that we're calling maybe from trauma or from challenging early experiences, I call that our old pain. And sometimes we're going to need to process through that. We might have areas that we need to grieve. We need to get a better understanding of things that happened, gain a different perspective on things that happened. So sometimes we do need to do that work, and at other times, really what's going on isn't so much about old pain. It might be about what's going on in our current life, things that we need to work through. So we're going to be doing both. We're going to go back in time when we need to and process deeper challenges, and learn how to do that, and also process the current challenges that are going on in our life that are leading us to turn to food.
And then from there, your next skill number 2, it's practicing self-validation in the way that you talk to yourself, the way that you understand yourself, the way you validate yourself. So let's talk about what self-validation means for our audience first.
Yes, well, as I said before, the 7-skill mindfulness practice is developed so that you will connect to yourself, and also so that you will you will develop an inner nurturing voice, because most emotional eaters have a very strong inner critic voice, a voice that beats them up. They often have a strong inner indulging voice, a voice that says, yeah, we had a hard day, let's go get cookies. The dominant voice in their head is more of a what I call the feeling self, a very young part of them that's kind of running the show. That's the part that's, going for the food too often. But what's missing is a supportive, nurturing, kind, warm, ever helpful, ever loving voice. And so we need to wire that in. And many emotional eaters I've worked with never had enough exposure to that kind of nurturing. Even their caregivers may have been very loving and kind, but perhaps they didn't know how to nurture them properly, or they were distracted, or there just wasn't enough good, consistent, sufficient nurturance. So we need to develop that voice, and it doesn't just develop on its own without some kind of practice. So the 7-skill mindfulness practice I teach in the book is designed to build that voice. So in skill number 2, we're going to start really using that voice. And whatever emotions and sensations we identified in skill number 1 when we popped the hood, in skill number 2, we're going to validate those. So what does validation mean? It means offering ourselves the developmentally critical acceptance and understanding that perhaps we didn't receive enough of, or perhaps we never received early in our lives. So we're going to say things to ourselves like, it's okay to feel sad. Of course you're feeling hurt. It makes sense to feel angry in this situation. It's understanding and it's acceptable. All of those feelings, all of those sensations are valid. They're all acceptable. It's okay to feel everything you're feeling. I can't tell you there isn't a week that goes by in my practice where I hear one of my clients say something like, I know this is silly that I feel this way, or I know it's ridiculous that I feel this way. And I'm always saying to them, there's no feeling that's silly. There is no feeling that's ridiculous. They're your feelings. They're in a context. So let's work on validating everything we feel, making it okay, even if we're feeling rage, even if we're feeling hatred, even if we're feeling selfish, whatever. Everything is okay to feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I really hear a lot from my clients is that okay sometimes means to them that this is comfortable and okay to stay. And what you're saying and what I hear you saying, and this is how I've approached it also, is what is here, and it's some part of natural part of you that exists. So let's accept it, let's have it be okay, and then afterward, if you want to do something with it, then definitely you could do it, but not fight with it or nor negate it, because that just doesn't make sense, because it's an emotion that is arising, and we need to honor it as what is, although uncomfortable. And sometimes,
right, and some people will say, yes, and some people will say, well, how can I validate myself, when I just ate a whole tray of brownies? Like, how am I going to validate that? And I say to them, we're not validating the behaviors that are wayward.
Yes.
We're validating the emotions that fuel the behaviors. So we're validating that I felt really sad when my boyfriend walked out on me on Friday night, and that's why I baked a tray of brownies. So we're validating it was okay to feel sad and to feel hurt. And in fact, that was the best way at this point in your journey that you knew how to take care of yourself.
Yes. And that's then your skill 3 is reinforcing an alliance and offer love, support, and comfort to yourself in that way, so that you're not splitting yourself, you're not scolding yourself, you're not being abusive to yourself, but you're actually understanding, loving, accepting, and supporting and comforting yourself, and then moving along to what's healthy for you.
Right, and what's so important about skill number 3, which is called reinforce the alliance, is that, again, I'm honing in here on building that inner nurturing voice and learning how to form the alliance with that youngest part of yourself. So when you're, really emotionally dysregulated, you've just had a really bad day, all you can think about is binging, you're all feeling self. You feel very young, very emotional. In comes this voice, hey there, I'm right here with you. I see you. I care about you. I love you. I'm closer to you than your breath. I know you're having a really hard day. I'm right here with you. And in this step, so we reinforce the alliance, I'm right here with you. We offer support. I can help you. I'm here. And then we offer comfort and soothing. And this is a critical piece, because most emotional, or many emotional eaters, don't even know what soothing is. They cannot even tell you what they could say to themselves that would be soothing. And so this is a skill that needs to be developed. What is soothing? Is it soothing to say to yourself, everything will be okay, or is that too general? Is it soothing to say, I'm sorry that you're going through this. I know how challenging a situation is. I love you. What is soothing and comforting? So we're learning, just like we're popping the hood and we're learning about our emotional world and our bodily sensations, we're also learning about what do we find comforting and soothing.
Well, many people will say food.
Right, and so we have to re-educate ourselves, like long before there was food. I often give people this example where I say, okay, when you're at home, and you're done eating, I want you to pretend like you're out in Nepal, or a small village in Nepal, and the cafeteria is just closed. There's no more food for the entire night, right? Cafeteria is closed. What are you going to do with those feelings now? Mm-hmm. How are you going to comfort yourself? How are you going to soothe yourself? How are you going to entertain yourself? Whatever your needs are, how are you going to do that without food?
And that's
right?
when
so if we're
other
talking
skills.
About comforting and soothing, how do you do that? What is comforting and soothing? This is where the learning is.
Yes, the person
about ourselves
has to come up with new skills at that moment while they've been trained or trained themselves into just going to food. Now they can retrain and come up with other creative ways of soothing themselves. So food, they're not limiting themselves only with food as a comforting agent.
Right, and in this skill, we're learning how to use our words to comfort and soothe, because that's very important to learn how to have words and phrases that we find comforting and soothing. Because what I've often found is that emotional eaters will then go to sleep, or they'll distract themselves with a book or a movie. And that, unfortunately, doesn't build much skill. So we're not looking for distractions here. We're really looking for growth and skill building. And in the process of that skill building, again, we're rewiring into the brain new neural pathways so that when we're upset, we can access a soothing, calming, and regulating function of the brain, the top part of the brain, the cortex, that perhaps never really got well developed.
Mm-hmm. So then we go into skill 4, which is get clear on needs. So beside the emotion that shows up for us, that emotion is also a signal for some sort of a need. Right? So it's like looking
I'm
at...
having a little trouble hearing you again, Foojan.
So the conversation is, what is your need? What is it that you can find inside of yourself beyond the emotions, and getting clear with your needs?
Right. So in that skill, we're ready. So we've pulled away from the urge to turn to food, and we've identified what we're feeling, our emotions and our bodily sensations. We've validated all the feelings. We've reinforced this alliance with a very kind, loving, and nurturing part of ourselves. And now we're getting ready to identify what is it in this situation. So when I've had that argument with my boyfriend and he walks out, what is it that I need? And we're trying not... I'm getting my own voice coming back at me.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yeah, let me...
Okay, sorry.
If you're having difficulty, I can try to call you back. I can go ahead and put a music for everyone to listen to.
I can hear you now.
Okay, good.
Now I can hear you fine.
Okay, go ahead then.
Okay. So now we're going to get clear on our needs. We're going to really identify what in that situation do I need. So if my boyfriend walks out and we've had an argument, when we identify our needs, we try not to identify what we need someone else to do. Like, I need my boyfriend to be kinder. I need my boyfriend to listen. We try to identify a need that we can meet ourselves. So perhaps I need soothing right now that he walked out. Perhaps I need comfort. Perhaps I need just to release some of these feelings that are building up. Maybe I need hope that we'll be able to resolve our problems. So in step number 4, in skill number 4, we get clear on what do we need. And these are all, again, skills that they're very easy to learn if we practice them. And they're very critical, knowing what we're feeling, being able to validate what we're feeling, knowing what we're needing. So that's what skill 4 is about, really getting clear on your needs.
And you have this wonderful table that it states all the stages of life emotional need, which goes through the infancy, the toddlerhood, preschool age, school age, adolescent, young adulthood, and old age, for people to also reference and see really what their needs are on a general term in the different aspects of the stages, and yet learn how to tune in their own body and really seeing what is it that they're needing at that moment, and then seeing what it is that they can do as a behavior to fulfill those. And then your skill 5 goes into catching.
Yes, I was just going to say that sometimes, we will find when we're identifying our needs that our needs can be at really a very young stage of development. For example, we may be finding that we need a lot of validation and a lot of reassurance and a lot of soothing needs that go with an earlier stage of development. And as we do this work, we grow up our needs as well. Our needs become more age appropriate, if you will.
And that is so important, Julie, for people to understand that sometimes we do get stuck in a younger stage of ourselves that is no longer appropriate, or it's here, or it needs to be handled and taken care of. And then how can we take care of ourselves to grow ourselves up versus needing for the external world to do it? Because if our parents didn't, or the external world it wasn't available for us to give us what we needed in order to move forward, then acknowledging what needs we have, then we become the self-creator of fulfilling that need, so we can go to the next level and the next age-appropriate need that we have.
Right, and I think it can be so challenging for people. I know it was in my own journey, because when you don't get the needs met at the proper time when you're young, you really have no way of knowing that that's happening, right?
Right.
Because all you know is what you're experiencing.
Yes.
And so then you kind of go out in the world and you still have these needs and they're still unmet, and you're trying to get them met everywhere. I used to kind of have a saying where I would say, go everywhere and say, "Are you my mommy? Are you my mommy? Are you my mommy?" And kind of looking to get those needs met by your friends and by your partner and by maybe your clients, trying to get them met everywhere. And hopefully at some point you begin to realize that it's not going to work well that way, that you risk draining all the people in your life trying to get everyone to take care of you in that way, and that, in fact, you yourself can learn to meet those needs, even those critical developmental needs that may not have been met. You yourself can learn to meet them, and you could actually do it the best for yourself because you know yourself the most intimately. And that's the wonderful part about learning these skills, is that you really can give yourself what you missed out on and really heal those parts of yourself so that you can have the best life, that you deserve and that you want to have.
And through this, then we can also become aware of some of the self-defeating thoughts and belief systems. And your skill number 5 says to catch and reframe self-defeating thoughts.
Right. Typically when we're popping the hood and we're going in identifying, so again, we've pulled away from a situation that's causing distress and we've popped the hood and identify what we're feeling. Often, we'll notice lots of thoughts like, "Oh, my boyfriend's a jerk," or, "I can't stand that coworker," or "I can't believe he said that." We have a lot of thoughts going on, and I always ask people to kind of put those on hold while you're working on the first few skills, and then we'll come back to the thoughts. So maybe you come up with a thought that, "I'll never lose this weight," or "I'll never find love." Well, thoughts are very powerful. They're very powerful energy, and thoughts can really, in a vicious cycle, we can have some emotions, particular unpleasant emotions, think some self-defeating thoughts, trigger more unpleasant emotions, more self-defeating thoughts, and we really get stuck in a spiral downward. So we're going to need somewhere to kind of catch some of those thoughts, maybe a thought like, "I'll never lose this weight," which can create, sadness and depression, and reframe that perhaps with an energizing thought or a calming thought or even just a neutral thought. So maybe something like, "As I practice patience and as I practice loving myself, I'm able to make small baby step changes that will help me release weight over time." Learning how to catch the thoughts that we have that are critical, judgmental, shaming, and just plain self-defeating, and reframe them with thoughts that really work. And not just affirmations, because I think sometimes, we use affirmations, but we don't really feel them, or we don't really personalize them. Yeah. So really getting good reframes for some of those challenging thoughts that you tend to recycle will really help you move forward.
Yes, it's important to also believe the new reframing and belief that you are telling yourself. Because if it's just, like you say, if I just pick up a sentence and keep repeating it, does not necessarily mean that I would start believing it. A part of me that doesn't believe it, it will just diffuse it. So the reframing part is so important, that there is a sentence where I get to enjoy, I get to kind of hold and feel safe and nurtured by, and that it's believable for me. And I can be convinced that, yes, that is also who I am, and be able to take it in order to replace it. And
yes, and it's really important. This is a critical step. I mean, I see, and again, I want to highlight one thing about all these steps is that you have to practice. When I was doing thought reframing work, I reframed a minimum of 2 of my self-defeating thoughts every single day for a year. I kept a journal, and I kept working on reframes, and it paid off immensely. I didn't know back then the neuroscience about rewiring my brain, but I replaced kind of very critical shaming tapes in my head, if you will, with very nurturing, loving tapes. CDs, we should call them now. Back then I was thinking of them as tapes.
And your skill 6 is highlight resources and provide hope.
Right. So another skill that we're going to need to have to really put an end to our emotional eating is we're going to need to learn how to remind ourselves of our strengths and our resources. Sometimes when we're really feeling down on ourselves, we forget all the things that we've done in our lives, all the accomplishments. We forget who we really are, the kindness, the warmth, the good person that we are. So we need to learn, and again, this is where that nurturing voice comes in. That nurturing voice is going to do this. You know, he is going to come in and say, hey, you know, you are kind and funny and warm and, you know, accommodating, and you accomplished this, and this. You know, I believe in you. You're incredible. We also are going to need that voice to hold hope for us, because at many points in time, you know, we can struggle with hope. It's a critical skill, is to be able to take a challenging situation and learn how to hold out hope. Oftentimes I work with people and they're really struggling with pessimism and struggle with hopelessness. And we have to learn, how do we hold hope? How do we, for example, I have someone that I work with who, whenever she has an ache or a pain, she catastrophizes, and she says, you know, I'm sure, you know, that this pain in my side is ovarian cancer and I'm going to die a horrible death, right? And we'll talk about, you know, reframing that with a more hopeful thought, like, you know, I've taken very good care of myself in my life, so there's a good chance that I don't have anything. Also, if there is something, I would be catching it probably fairly early because I'm pretty in touch with my body. And I'm not going to start this whole worrying process until I actually have a diagnosis, right? We kind of learn how to work with our thoughts so that they give us a little bit more hope.
And the last skill, the skill 7 of this series, not the last skill that you ever need to learn, but the last skill of this 7 series, addresses needs and set nurturing limits, which is, you know, yes, we validate ourselves. Yes, we're going to be nurturing to ourselves and all of that. And yet with our cravings, or maybe the child part of us or the young part of us who takes on this type of a comfort and wants to maybe divulge itself to anything that shows up. For example, I have a child part that says I should be able to eat whatever I want and not have any consequences. So it seems like there needs to be setting some nurturing limits to that part of me that has that belief system and insists on it, that anything that tastes good, I should just be able to have as much as I want and not have any consequences. So the skill 7 is address needs and set nurturing limits for yourself.
Well, that's why we have, you know, the inner nurturer. Her job is quite lofty. You know, she has a lot of things that she has to accomplish, and one of them is she has to morph into what I call an inner limit setter. So the feeling self might say, you know, like you said, Foojan, you know, I should be able to have whatever I want whenever I want it, right? Or the feeling self, maybe you're out shopping and the feeling self says, I must have that purse. That blue color is the perfect color with my shoes and I must have it. And so maybe the inner limit setter, the inner nurturer says, well, we really can't just eat anything that we want because too much of certain foods is unhealthy for us and imbalances our body. So we already had lots of sweets this weekend, so let's not, take that slice of pie. And so the feeling self says, but I want it. I want that slice of pie. I don't care. And the inner nurturer is saying, yes, but we want to take better care of our health. We've actually wanted to lose a couple of pounds. We need to not have that piece of pie. And the feeling self says, I don't care about weight and I don't care about health. I want the piece of pie now. And this is where the inner limit setter comes in and says, she might explore, I know you're really wanting that piece of pie, but we're not hungry, so I'm really wondering what you're feeling right now and what you're really needing, right? So maybe the feeling self says, well, I guess I'm kind of bored. I'm feeling kind of unstimulated. And so the inner nurture says, well, let's work on that need, but right now we're not going to have the piece of pie. Or what are you needing when you want to buy that extra purse? Well, I don't know. I'm not feeling that attractive lately, so I feel like if I had a new purse, it would cheer me up and make me feel better. Okay, well, did I tell you how beautiful you are to me and how beautiful you always are? And we need to stick to the budget, so we're not going to buy the purse. So we need to learn how to build that voice that says, I'm here with you. I want to know what you're feeling. I understand what you're feeling. I can take care of you. And we're going to set this limit.
All right.
And stick with it. And when we're building that voice, as we've been talking about today, when we're wiring that in, again, we're building that part of the brain that is regulating. So we're going to start to notice as we build these skills that all of a sudden maybe, when we started we weren't able to do this, but now all of a sudden we seem to be able to say, okay, I'm not going to have that pie, and walk out of the kitchen and feel done.
Right.
And you're going to say, wow, that's kind of miraculous.
Yes. I think that most of us have been used to discipline, maybe in some punitive or some harsh or some appears to be more of something being taken away, like a pleasure being taken away. And that's usually has been called a discipline, as if we got to let go of something which is pleasurable in order to obtain something that is more responsible. And what I hear with that's being offered in your book, When Food is Comfort, it's to find the skills, through practicing these skills of accessing an internal nurturing voice, a mature, wise, validating, affirming, unconditionally kind, loving, soothing, comforting, encouraging, protecting, and hopeful and helpful adult voice inside of us, where it can actually hold us to accountability and responsibility of our life and our body and our health in a way that is nurturing, and it does offer pleasure in a whole different way versus dealing with us as if I have to hold myself in a space where I can, I have to let go of something that gives me pleasure and just do your homework or do this or do that chore. And it's taking that and shifting it into, I'm the adult that I take care of myself, and I do it in a way that it's also fun, and I also take care of myself. So thank you so much, Julie. We only have a couple of seconds to finish up. So I just wanted everybody to know, I wanted to thank you for joining me, and love to have you again. But for everyone to know, to go to Amazon.com or go ahead to go to overeatingrecovery.com, where they can find you and be able to actually go through your 12-week emotional eating recovery program. Find this wonderful book of When Food is Comfort, Nurture Yourself Mindfully, Rewire Your Brain, and End Emotional Eating.
Thank you for having me, Foojan. It's been my pleasure.
And thank you again for being, and for all of you who are listening with your heart, thank you for being with us. And until next week, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. Bye-bye.
You're listening to The Inner Voice with Dr. Foojan Zeine, only on LA Talk Radio.